Okay, good evening. As usual, it's been a pleasure to be here at Bali. Very much like back home in Goa. I come from this beautiful Western Indian state of Goa, which is very much like Bali. It's got beautiful beaches, sea, sun, and the sands, that they say. Basically, as a physician, I am a trained geriatric physician. So I do get a lot of people who are already over the hill. People who are old, who come to me, and I need them to have the best quality of life that, as a doctor, I can give them. And as a clinical metal toxicologist, I have had enough and more cases because of the number of cases that I see, because India, the population is huge. Because of the number of cases I see, I've had many patients who do not respond, like most of you might have found, respond to treatments of chelation or metal detoxification. And going through various literatures over the period of the last 7, 8 years, I realized that we were doing a few things not too good. A problem in our bodies is when our bodies or our cells are glutathione depleted. Now, what does that actually mean? Going in detail of this particular product or of this particular substance, I realized that this could be one way that we could provide a lot of our aging patients a way out of the aging problems they do suffer every day. And I've been using this, though this is not available in India, I get it from outside the country in the IV form, because that's the best form. And I've got patients who actually come on a wheelchair into my clinic and 45 days later actually walk out. So when you see such kind of improvements, then you realize that there's something that you must be doing that is good. Now, I know it's late afternoon. It's not a very nice time to look into theory of how your cells actually use glutathione and why it is so effective. But bear with me, go through this because it might change your practice like it did mine. As I begin, I'd like to thank Thymus-therapie for giving me this opportunity to present this lovely presentation this afternoon. So let's start by understanding what glutathione is. It's a sulfur-containing amino acid. It's present almost in every cell. It cannot enter the cell, hence it is made there from 3 constituent amino acids, mainly cysteine, glycine, and glutamic acid. High electron donating capacity generates its great reducing power, and that is how it basically acts. Depends on the availability on cysteine, which is scarce in food. So the rate at which glutathione can be made depends on how much of cysteine is there in your food. Now, cysteine molecule has a sulfur-containing portion, which gives glutathione molecule its biochemical activity, but most importantly, its vitamins B6 and riboflavin, which are critical for maintaining adequate levels of glutathione within the body. A variety of minerals, including copper and selenium, are also very, very important for the cellular levels of glutathione. And if you have mercury intoxication, where mercury mimics selenium, definitely you are going to be glutathione depleted. And as you go along, you'll understand what happens. It exists in 2 forms, but the more important form, the more important form is the reduced form. It is known, glutathione or reduced glutathione is a tripeptide, and we normally call it glutathione, basically. So it is a reduced form that is known as glutathione, and the oxidized form is glutathione disulfide. And it is the reducing power of glutathione that is the key to its multiple actions, specifically those that save the cells from dying, and its effectiveness as a systemic free radical scavenger. Now, glutathione is under tight hemostatic control, both intracellularly and extracellularly. And there's a dynamic balance always maintained between glutathione and glutathione disulfide, or the oxidized form. So glutathione is, now how does it function? Basically, it is an important or a very major antioxidant. It neutralizes damaging free radicals and peroxide molecules. It recharges oxidized vitamin C, so the body can use it all over again. Its significant reducing power also makes it a very important factor in recycling other antioxidants besides vitamin C or vitamin E, which have become oxidized, and does keep them in active state. Glutathione bolsters the body, the structure of body proteins, and assists in the transport of amino acids across the cell membrane. So basically, it provides amino acids intracellularly also. It is very important as a detoxifying agent. It enables the body to get rid of undesirable toxins and pollutants. It forms a soluble compound with the toxin, which can then be excreted through the urine and the gut, or the gut. Liver and kidneys contain high level of glutathiones as they are most exposed to toxins while they are excreting these toxins. Lungs also are rich in glutathione, partly for the same reason. Many cancer-producing chemicals, heavy metals, and drug metabolized are disposed by glutathione. Glutathione plays a crucial role in maintaining normal balance between oxidation and antioxidation. This, in turn, regulates many of the cell's vital functions and as the synthesis and repair of DNA, such as synthesis and repair of DNA, the synthesis of proteins, and the activation and regulation of all enzymes. So the glutathione disulfide balance is hemostatically controlled. It's definitely a continuous self-adjusting mechanism with respect to the balance between glutathione synthesis by the synthetase enzymes, and it's recycling from glutathione disulfide by the glutathione reductase enzymes. And then its utilization by the transhydrogenases, peroxidases, transferases, and the transpeptidases. These are the various enzymes that do use glutathione for its various functions intracellularly. So glutathione is a major pro-hemostatic modulator of the sulfhydryl groups on proteins. Its reducing power is also hemostatically employed to fine-tune the redox state of various cellular environments. It is normally very high, the glutathione disulfide ratio is normally very high in the mitochondria. Why is this? Because the mitochondria, basically there's a lot of oxidation that takes place. There's a lot of oxidation that takes place, so therefore you have a high flux of oxygen radicals because of the oxidative phosphorylation activities in the mitochondria. Whereas it is not so in the reticulum, in the endoplasmic reticulum. There the ratio is slightly low because you don't have a very high oxidizing potential there, or not many oxidizing activities happening in the endoplasmic reticulum. Glutathione is required in many intricate steps needed to carry out the immune system. Now let's look at the functions of glutathione. It is needed for the immune function, specifically for lymphocytes to multiply in order to develop strong immune response, and for killer lymphocytes to be able to kill undesirable cells such as the cancer cells or those affected by viruses. Glutathione's sulfhydryl character and its reducing power also controls proteins known as metallothioneins, which are able to bind with heavy metals and other potential sulfhydryl poisons to facilitate their subsequent removal from the body. Now this is a very, very important action. Why? Because when we give chelating agents to get rid of heavy metals, specifically mercury and others, you don't get rid of the intracellular metal at all. It is glutathione that brings the intracellular metal out into the extracellular space, and it's then that the chelating agent pulls it out of the body in whatever manner. So it is this function that helps us detoxify the body best when you're using glutathione. The metallothioneins, thyrodoxins, and other redox regular proteins are ultimately regulated by the glutathione levels and the glutathione disulfide redox ratio. Glutathione levels in human tissues normally range from 0.1 to 10 millimoles, most concentrated in the liver, up to 10 millimoles, and in the spleen, kidney, lens, erythrocytes, and leukocytes. Plasma concentration is normally in the micromolar range, and it's approximately 4.5 micromoles. So you will understand that the intracellular concentration is far higher than what you see in the plasma. Now, the three major applications of glutathione in our body, and you'll understand why it is important that if we use this, we will be able to do a lot for our patients. It acts as a cofactor for glutathione S transferases in the detoxifying pathway. I just showed you how. It also helps in the transferase in the liver detoxification. So what it basically does here is, by being a cofactor in the glutathione transferase, S transferases, it helps in the liver detoxification by making those toxins a conjugate and fat soluble. It also acts as a substrate for gamma-glutamyl transpeptidases, enzymes which are located on the outer cell surface, which transfer glutamin moiety from glutathione to other amino acids for the subsequent uptake of the cell. So here, it helps in taking up amino acids into the cell. And then, finally, the one which is equally important for direct free radical scavenging and as an antioxidant enzyme cofactor. Now, this is one of the most potent antioxidant or free radical scavengers. So glutathione depletion leads to cell death and has been documented in many, many degenerative conditions. And cell death, as you know, leads to aging. So glutathione depletion may be the ultimate factor determining the vulnerability to oxidant attack. So what does depletion do? Glutathione is depleted by oxidative stressors that can include ultraviolet and other radiation, viral infections, environmental toxins, household chemicals, and heavy metals, surgery, inflammation, burns, septic shock, and dietary deficiencies of glutathione, precursors, and enzyme cofactors. Cigarette smoke is one of the most dangerous because a single puff of cigarette smoke contains 1 trillion free radicals, and it burns away the antioxidants, vitamin C and E, as well as other nutrients, thus depleting glutathione. In liver disease, you also have depletion of glutathione, and these are alcoholic liver disease, viral hepatitis, both chronic and acute, non-alcoholic cirrhosis, and when you take excess amount of medications like acetaminophen, as well as others which damage the liver. Sustained oxidative challenge to the lungs also results in depletion of glutathione and other antioxidants from the lungs. And this is particularly important in cases where you have acute respiratory distress syndrome, COPD, or chronic obstructive pulmonary disease. And if you see a lot of patients like I do who are elderly, most of them have this problem as they grow old. They say, we never had asthma in our lives, but why am I having this? It's basically glutathione depletion. Idiopathic pulmonary fibrosis, asthma, neonatal lung damage. It also results in immunity disorders because the proliferation, growth, and differentiation of immune cells depend on glutathione. Both the T and B lymphocytes require adequate levels of intracellular glutathione to differentiate, and intracellular glutathione is also required for T cell proliferation and for the activation of cytotoxic T killer cells and many other specific T cell functions. In autoimmune disorders, you have T lymphocytes which show depressed responsiveness to antigens, mutagens, because of insufficient interleukin-2 production, which is mainly due to glutathione depletion. And this is seen in SLE, systemic lupus erythematosus, rheumatoid arthritis, aging, type 2 diabetes, ulcerative colitis, and viral disorders, hepatitis, HIV, etc. Now, this is an area where Dr. Pulmelter has done a lot of work in neurodegeneration, specifically in Parkinson's, and the brain, they say, is particularly susceptible to free radical effect. But why is this? Because it is most highly oxygenated, and thus it makes it vulnerable to endogenous oxygen free radical production. And it has high proportion of unsaturated lipid, which makes it vulnerable for peroxidation. So in the substantia nigra, a connection has been established between the antioxidant depletion, including glutathione depletion, and tissue degeneration. Now, thus, Parkinson's disease is based primarily in the substantia nigra. And studies have found that glutathione levels were dramatically low in people suffering from Parkinson's. Indicators such as disappearance of melanin from substantia nigra, and the increase of total iron and ferric iron, and the marked decrease of glutathione in substantia nigra, the decrease of antioxidant enzyme activity, and substantial increases in lipid peroxidation indicators all argue that oxidative stress has a high role to play in initiation and or progression of Parkinson's disease. Now, why is this? Because the oxygen requirements of human brain account for 20% of the oxygen consumed by the body, despite the brain being only 2% of the body weight. The brain is among the major organs generating large amounts of reactive oxygen species. Now, how does this neurodegeneration, or how does glutathione protect the brain from oxidative stress? You can see it here. What it does is it non-enzymatically reacts with the superoxide, the nitric oxide, the hydroxyl, and the peroxynitrite particles here. And glutathione also reacts with hydrogen peroxide, that's over here, as well as other peroxides. And that's how it prevents all these free radicals from attacking the brain. So in brain, glutathione concentration is lower than those of the liver, kidney, spleen, or small intestine. And glutathione depletion in the brain leads to increased production, obviously, of superoxide, hydroxyl radicals, and hydrogen peroxide. Now, the intracellular pool of glutathione is very important, because it is this intracellular glutathione pool that limits the oxidative stress, thus reducing neuronal injury. Glutathione is a major antioxidant in the brain, with a concentration of approximately 2 to 3 millimoles, which is much higher than that in the blood or cerebrospinal fluid. Now, glutathione, like I said already, non-enzymatically reacts with superoxide, nitric oxide, hydroxyl radical, and peroxynitrite radicals. Now, glutathione has a high ability to scavenge superoxide than N-acetylcysteine or cysteine. There is no known enzymatic defense action against hydroxyl radicals, making glutathione the only compound capable of scavenging these free radicals. So you can now see how important glutathione is in preventing neurodegeneration, because it is the only compound that actually has a defense against the hydroxyl radicals. Glutathione reacts with various endogenous and xenobiotic compounds mediated by glutathione S transferase to form mixed disulfides, which are exported to the outside of the cell. And this is another very important action. It forms the glutathione HNE adduct, which plays an important role in cellular detoxification. Glutathione is a major redox buffer and maintains intracellular redox hemostasis. Under conditions of oxidative stress, glutathione can lead to reversible formation of mixed disulfides between protein thiol groups, so S-glutathionylation, a process critical for preventing irreversible oxidation of proteins in the brain. So glutathione serves as a neuromodulator, a neurotransmitter. It also binds via its gamma-glutamyl moiety to the NMDA receptors. It is thought to exert dual, that is agonistic and antagonistic actions on neuronal responses mediated by the NMDA receptors in the brain. Glutathione serves as an endogenous nitric oxide reservoir to form S-nitrosoglutathione, and this can release nitric oxide under certain conditions with biological effects, while S-nitrosoglutathione has a protective effect in the brain under oxidative stress conditions. So here's another very complicated way where glutathione works and saves the brain from damage in oxidative stress conditions. It is also required for cell proliferation and, most importantly, neuronal differentiation. Increased levels of nitrotyrosine, a permanent marker for pyroxynitrite attack on proteins, seen when glutathione is depleted, were demonstrated in Alzheimer's disease, Parkinson's, and amyotrophic lateral sclerosis. Now, increased levels of 4-HNE, and you've seen what HNE does earlier, is the most cytotoxic product of lipid peroxidation, have also been documented in all these three conditions. So when glutathione is depleted, you have high levels of 4-HNE, and you also have increased level of nitrotyrosine. And both these are responsible for neurodegeneration. So glutathione supplementation should surely reverse this. Now, aging is a critical factor for glutathione hemostasis. Several lines of evidence support the glutathione decline with aging in the brain. Glutathione depletion enhanced oxidative stress, leading to neuronal degeneration. In fact, brain glutathione is reduced in some age-related neurodegenerative diseases. Alzheimer's is a leading age-related neurodegenerative disease which pathogenically involves oxidative stress. We've already spoken about Parkinson's, but the severity of glutathione depletion parallels pathologically or clinically the Parkinson's severity. Decreased glutathione may be an early event in Parkinson's progression. Progressive supranuclear palsy is also an age-related neurodegenerative disorder, which also has its pathogenesis to oxidative stress. And recently, these patients were shown to have decreased glutathione levels in the substantia nigra. Now, having gone through neurodegeneration, it also plays a very important role in preventing atherosclerosis, because we know that oxidative stress within the arteries depletes L-glutathione and other antioxidants. So if there was glutathione, you wouldn't have the production of atherosclerosis. Glutathione peroxidase enzymes and various glutathione S transferases may be employed in the endothelia for the yin-yang regulation of vascular tone and responsiveness, many through their influences on the eicosanoid balance, from anti-inflammatory towards pro-inflammatory. And we all know that those who are pro-inflammatory do have a problem with atherosclerosis. Platelets contain millimolar levels of glutathione. Now, oxidative stressors tend to shift the platelets' eicosanoid balance away from prostaglandin 2 and towards thromboxane, resulting in a pro-aggregative state. Thus, platelets from diabetics have lower glutathione level and make excess thromboxane, thus having a lower threshold for aggregation. This may contribute to increased atherosclerosis in your diabetic patients. Reduced levels of glutathione peroxidases have also been found in the platelets of patients with myocardial infarction. Glutathione can produce coronary vasodilation when added to isolated perfused heart, very likely due to its normalizing effect on prostaglandin synthesis. Now, exogenous glutathione can also be employed to raise the threshold of platelet aggregation, thus making it difficult for platelets to aggregate and hence preventing the endothelium from getting damaged and thus causing atherosclerosis. So in pancreatitis, it has been shown that there is increased lipid peroxidation products in the pancreatic tissue, duodenal juice, and bile. And the clinical status improves significantly in these patients when combined pancreatic and other organ failure were treated with glutathione precursors like N-acetylcysteine or IV glutathione. In Crohn's disease or other gastrointestinal inflammatory disorders, there was a lot of patients were showing very low levels of glutathione in their gastric mucosa, and these patients with gastritis and duodenal ulcers were linked to the H. pylori infection. Now, in Crohn's disease, affected ileal zones were found to have very low levels of glutathione and high glutathione disulfide levels. And the glutathione enzymes were considerably altered. So this does make a case for giving glutathione orally. So in short, the consequences of sustained glutathione depletion are grim. As cellular glutathione is depleted, first the individual cells die in those areas most affected. Then the zones of tissue damage begin to appear. Those tissues with the highest content of polyunsaturated lipids and or the most meager antioxidant defenses are generally most vulnerable. So what basically happens is the first localized free radical damage spreads across the tissue in an ever-widening, self-propagating wave. And if this spreading wave of tissue degeneration is to be halted, then the antioxidant factors like glutathione must be augmented. So how do you replete? Depletion of glutathione appears to be very central to most adaptive strategies for meeting the challenge of sustained oxidative stress. And you have several foods containing natural glutathione, naturally occurring glutathione. Now, please remember, these are foods. This is not actual glutathione that gets into your gastrointestinal tract, and these are the most common fruits that you can find and other foods. But when you use oral glutathione, it is not absorbed. So therefore, it doesn't really work at the cellular level. So you need to give IV glutathione. It only works in maybe Crohn's disease and ulcerative colitis because these are local degenerative problems of the gastrointestinal tract. But there are marked benefits reported from IV administration, especially in Parkinson's. And if you add precursors like N-acetylcysteine together with glutathione, you have much, much better results. Where do you use IV glutathione? Let us look at it. Now, these are the conditions. Neurodegenerative conditions like Parkinson's and Alzheimer's. In atherosclerosis, in lung conditions like exposure to cigarette smoke, pollutants, asthma, acute respiratory distress syndrome, and sepsis. Autoimmune disorders like SLE and rheumatoid arthritis. It even helps in conditions like Crohn's disease and ulcerative colitis, like I just said. But it is very, very important if you want to detoxify your body from metal intoxication, in liver dysfunction, and most specifically, if you want to delay your aging process. Thank you. It forms a very important part of my IV therapies because that is what this signifies. You start with, as a baby, and this is when you're a teenager. This when you get to your adult life, But if you want to live well, you need to get to this later on in life. All right? So that is what I normally do. Thank you for a patient hearing. I know it was a little theoretical, but you need to know, because if you want to use this in your armamentarium to fight aging, this could be one of the molecules that you could use. Thank you.
Please contact the German Society for Thymus Therapy for further information.